Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce Purdy. Welcome, Bruce.
Hey, David. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. It's a good day for me, Bruce, if I get out exercising. It's kind of as simple as that, I find.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel better about the world and better about myself. And if I can get out there, get outside, and run around a little bit, I feel a lot better. So here I am.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, and I've made it a central part of every day that I get out, and it's the only thing keeping me sane during this COVID. The last day I walked less than an hour was March the 5th.
Wow.
Yeah. So like I say, it's keeping me sane. So it's part of the to-do list every day. Get out, get moving.
Good stuff. Do you take different routes around St. Albert, or do you have
Oh,
one?
many different routes. Different
Yeah.
every day.
Alrighty.
Yeah, and
Well,
St.
I
Albert's great for pedestrians. Really good.
bet you a lot of people. I think initially the big joke was with COVID to everyone
Mhm.
was getting fatter, kind of staying home, and
Oops.
we got heck, Bruce,
Yeah, we
from
did,
a
and
reader, from a
rightfully
view
so. And that
listener
was
last time, and I blamed it on you. I said that's
no, you were
Bruce.
right. You were right. It is me.
Except I got my phone here too, but I think I
Okay,
have a silent thing when I get messages.
I'm
I
gonna
don't.
yeah, I'm gonna power my phone off right now just to keep that person and probably other people happy because it can be annoying. I've come to almost ignore it, but it's hard, I guess.
Alrighty.
I mean, I respond to it, but when I'm doing something else, I just don't pay any attention to it. So
Yeah,
let's do something else.
indeed. So I was saying the big joke was everyone was putting on weight and being indulgent and lying around. But I think, at least for me, and I think, well, you got on the fitness thing right early on this thing, but I think a lot of people are starting to think I've got to take care of my mental and physical health here,
Hmm.
and we're getting out there in the sunshine, and good for everyone who's doing that. And if you're not, I highly recommend it. So, Bruce, let's talk Oilers hockey.
Okay.
And I was just something flashed in my head. Remember in the WHA days, you'd go to the games and there'd be those three guys sitting there. One of them had a drum, and they'd be
Hmm.
pounding on the drum, yelling out "Ooh, ah, Oilers on the warpath."
Uh-huh.
Remember those guys?
Yep. Oh
They were
yeah,
there for
yeah.
years.
Yep. There was Semenko soldiers up in section 2 there for quite a while, or Sammy soldiers, I think they morphed into. And they used to get the chants going. I remember the one, we want Semenko, we want Troy. Come on, Sather, put out the boys. And of course,
Was it
Semenko
Jamie
and
Troy or Jamie
Jamie
Troy?
Troy
Tough guy,
were
tough player.
two fearsome warriors.
Yeah.
And you know what those guys were there for was the mayhem, which was very prominent in the hockey of the 1970s. There's our mandatory 70s reference right off the bat.
All right, crushed it. I was well. We had a few. We just descended into reminiscing there for a second. Although I have been thinking today about the playoffs and how
Hmm.
big an impact it is going to be without fans in the
Hmm.
stands, and how
Hmm.
much that's going to change the game and change our perception of it and change the excitement around it. And I hadn't been too worried about it, but then I got thinking about it. Boy, it could be kind of a downer, like if it just we've all seen these games from Europe at various junior world championship events that are like nobody's there.
Right.
And I guess if Team Canada's there, it can still seem pretty exciting, though, I think.
Hmm.
But yeah, it could be a bit of a downer. What do you? I don't know. We'll see.
Yep, it's going to be a whole lot different about it, that's for sure.
Today, we're going to talk about winners and losers at the weirdest NHL trade deadline slash playoff race that we've seen. The winners and losers of this strange process, which included a trade deadline. We'll talk about that.
Okay.
We will talk about Ryan Nugent Hopkins and Mikko Koskinen coming up, their year in review, which you've been working on, and how that's going to play into the playoffs. And we'll
Hmm.
talk about the secret weapon of the Chicago Blackhawks and how the Blackhawks may not be able to use that player, but I suspect they will be able to use this player. Ian Mitchell of St. Albert, Alberta, a
Mm.
flashy NCAA puck moving defenseman who is signed with Chicago, and we'll talk about him. Why don't we just start there, Bruce? Let's just get this one out of the way. So Mitchell, I think, is 20, if I'm not mistaken,
21.
21. He's played 3 years of college hockey in Denver, where he basically was about a point a game player. This last year, he played in the World Junior team 1 year for Canada. Highly unusual for a NCAA player to make the World Junior team for Team Canada.
Sure is
Happens
nowadays.
usually they might have one guy, and he
Yeah.
was that one guy 1 year.
That
Played for
was 2019. He played in the World Junior, and then a year later he played in the 2019 Spengler Cup because the tournaments have the same year because the Spengler Cup ends on December 31st, so it's at the very, very, very end of the year.
okay.
Whereas the World Junior, the one that starts at the same time as the Spengler Cup, will be always 1 year ahead of it because it runs into the following January. Anyway, he was a very rare college addition to Team Canada at the Spengler Cup, and he acquitted himself very well. I saw some of those games, and Mitchell played really well.
So he's kind of a, we don't know how he will do in the NHL. You know, high scoring players come from American hockey. Some of them
Hmm.
really pan out well, like Justin Schultz. Eventually has become a top puck moving defenseman in the NHL. But I remember there was all this excitement about a defenseman called Mike Riley
Yep.
a few years ago. Let me just look up his stats, and I don't think he did as well. There's Will Butcher,
Yep.
who strikes me as kind of a very similar kind of stats and stature size
Right.
wise to Ian Mitchell. But
Hmm.
so Chicago, they've traded away Gustafson and they have Mitchell coming in. Eric
Yeah.
Gustafson's quite a quality um,
Puck
puck moving
mover.
defenseman.
Mhm.
There's lots of questions about his defensive play, which I was reading out of Chicago. They're kind of hurting though for puck movers, although
Yeah.
Adam Boqvist is Boquist, Bokit,
Well,
Boqvist. What is it? How do you say his name? Do you know?
I say it Boquist, but who knows
Boqvist.
how he says it would be a better question.
Yeah,
But
he's
those
not a
are
bad little puck mover.
the two. Yeah, it was clear to me that Chicago, at the deadline, looking ahead to next year, saying, "Well, we might as well get something for Gustafson, which was it, a third-round pick they got from Calgary. It wasn't that expensive, but he's only a rental." And because they had both Boquist and Mitchell uh, coming into camp next year, so they probably thought, well, we got a puck moving defender. We're going to make room for him. We got this guy. I'm pretty sure he's unrestricted, Gustafson. So they were able to, get something for him. It was your standard trade deadline trade of a team that's out of the running, trading off a guy to a team that's in the running for a pick. Except for the weird thing that nobody expected was Chicago actually making the playoffs. So they wind up kind of having to pay the price a little bit, and that they won't have Eric Gustafson in the playoffs, and they may not have Ian Mitchell due to this let's call it a provisional ruling by the NHL
Mm-hmm.
that any player signed during the pause will not be allowed to suit up during the playoffs. I think it's strange, and I think Chicago probably will appeal, and I think they may well win that appeal.
Why is Cale Makar allowed to play? Why would Cale Makar?
Well,
Didn't he not sign? Did he
he
sign
signed
before
in the
the season ended?
playoffs.
Oh, he
He
signed in
signed
the
in the
playoffs.
playoffs.
So
Yeah,
how is that allowed? And they
the
can't
the,
have Will
the
Butcher
series
playing,
was
or excuse
always
me,
already 2 games
Ian
in.
Mitchell playing.
Well, that's the question, and that's the question Chicago will be asking. He signed it when Calgary, 2 games into the playoff series between Colorado and Calgary, went right in the lineup and had an impact right away. Now, Cale Makar, I mean, we're talking about a very high level, top 5 overall draft talent who there was a lot of buzz about Cale Makar before he ever did play that first game. And I don't think we can say quite that about Ian Mitchell, but the cases are similar enough in terms of when the guys signed. I mean, none of the college guys were signed until after the stoppage because college hockey was still going down when the game came grinding to a halt. So even guys signed in the normal window right after the Frozen Four technically signed after the stoppage. So this provisional ruling, I have a feeling that there's obviously a lot of the details. They've worked out this big rough framework, and a lot of the details, such as the James Neal draft pick um, question. Those are details that will get answered in due course, and I'm half expecting that they'll change their ruling.
Bruce,
And
I'm
this was
80%
this was
expecting,
Bill
90% expecting they'll change the ruling.
this was Bill Daly equivocating as only Bill Daly can as he beat around the bush, and then another one trying to explain why players probably might be maybe. I'm trying to emulate Bill Daly, and I'm
Oh,
failing. Even I'm failing, and I know I do some of the same things. So
so here's Mitchell's stats: 32 points in 36 games. Mike Riley in his last year, 3 years college hockey, he had 42 points in 39 games. And Mike Riley was really, really expected to be a good NHL player and has not ever lived up to that billing. Will Butcher, who also played at the University of Denver,
hmm
4 years, and in his last year, he had 37 points in 43 games. And he's become, well, he's kind of gone down every year he's been in the NHL. He's had a really great rookie year,
right.
but not quite as sparkling since then. And then there's Cale Makar. He had 49 points in 41 games in his second and final university
Yeah.
college.
No,
So
he's
you
in
can see
another
he's in a
class.
different category, and what a fantastic player Cal Makar
Oh,
is. Like I really, I don't pay a lot of attention to the opposing teams, and people listening to this podcast probably realize that because I often get things wrong, and I don't have much to say about opposing players. But when I watched Cale Makar, he blew me away with his ability, his talent, his
game
ability to pass the
changer. You
puck.
see it right away. Yeah.
Oh God, what a great hockey player Cale Makar is. So yeah, hopefully hopefully this Mitchell kid is well. I don't want to wish him poorly just because he's in the Blackhawks. Hopefully
I
he's as
hope
good
he's
as Cale
really
Makar. He's
good.
from St. Albert, so we got to cheer for him, I guess.
I hope he's really good. Yeah, I have a close friend who knows his dad. So
Yeah.
I've been hearing about him. When he went to the Spengler Cup, I was given the heads up to keep an eye on him. So I did, and I was pretty impressed.
Bruce, let's talk about Ryan Nugent Hopkins.
Sure,
And you dug into his stats. I
I
mean, I'm
did.
really hoping to see the dynamite line together for the playoffs of D for Draisaitl, Y for Yamamoto, N for Nugent Hopkins, a mite line. They were the, in their time together, I think a strong case can be made. They were the single most effective line in the NHL. I think for any line that played together more than 300 minutes, they had easily the highest goals for percentage. More than, I think it was in like 73, 74% last time I checked. And, the other really good lines were 65, 67%, something like that.
Mhm.
Just that's what I want to see. But what do you think? Because I know that Tippett broke up the dynamite line
He
at the edge
did.
and had Nuge with McDavid. What did you find out? What would you like to happen?
Well, I was pretty impressed with how well he adjusted to getting switched to the wing, and after two previous shorter experiments with Connor McDavid, uh, the surprising and welcome aspect was that Tippett put him with Draisaitl and really loaded up the what in many people's opinion would be the second line, with McDavid's almost by definition being the first. But by production, there's no doubt that the dynamite line was Edmonton's first line in the second half of the season. And in that time, uh, uh, Nugent Hopkins himself was top five in the NHL in scoring from January 1st through March 11th. So, a nice stretch of games. There was, I think, 29 games in there, and he scored 37 points and 41 in his last 30 because he had a big night on New Year's Eve as well. And he went from, uh, after 35 games, he had 20 points. He was minus 10, and he was just kind of spinning his wheels. He'd had a hand injury, and he kind of struggled with it before he went on IR. He missed 2 weeks. He came back, and he wasn't 100% when he came back. It was one of those injuries that, it says he missed 6 games, but he was less than 100% for probably 12 or more. And then in the second half, he turned it just completely around, 41 points plus 11 in 30 games. And he went almost got it back to a point per game for the season as a whole. His best points per game total of his career, second best raw points total, even though he only played 65 games. And he crushed it on that line at even strength, and he crushed it on the power play, and he crushed it on the penalty kill. Like he was a jack of all trades for the Oilers. And the deeper I dove into his season in writing the review, the more I'm thinking, geez, they need to sign this guy. And ideally, well, he's coming up next year. I
I
mean,
know.
he's got a
Let him
year to
know.
run, but as of, technically after July 1st and any other year would open a 1 year negotiating window where the team has the only negotiating rights, but after which he's unrestricted free agent. And I would have said signing him is a priority, and it's an even bigger priority than I realized. And I'm a big booster of RNH, but man, his special teams performance was just off the charts. He was the only forward on the team, David, who played over a minute on both the power play and the penalty kill. And he played, in fact, 3:45 on the power play, so same as the big guys, and a minute 43 on the penalty kill, which was third most on the team in both departments. And the time that he was on the ice, the Oilers power play scored 11.5 goals per 60 minutes. And when he was on the ice on the penalty kill, the other team's power play scored less than 4 goals per 60 minutes. 11.5 to 4 basically was the split of how the team with the power play produced, depending on which side of the ice Nugent Hopkins was on. So his on ice goals results were off the charts. And at 5-on-5, he was a killer. He was the second highest points, had 25 points 5-on-5 after January 1st, second in the league, second in the NHL. So head of, tied with Draisaitl, head of McDavid.
Bruce, I remember a few years ago there was serious talk of trading Nugent Hopkins.
Mm-hmm.
It was coming up a lot. And I remember
Oh.
saying at the time and writing at the time many times, they must not trade this player until they try him on the wing.
Yes.
They must not trade this player until they try him on the wing. If you do that, especially because they got to trade him, like people were saying, trade him for a good winger. I'm thinking, like, what? So exactly.
That's what we did with Ryan Strome. Remember how well that worked out?
Yes. Yeah. Try him on the wing. See how that works. Because, why not? And I don't think, Bruce, Nugent Hopkins a top line center in the NHL. A good one. I don't. He's not. I don't think he's very strong in his own end in the defensive slot. And is he a good primary puck carrier on a line? He's okay. I don't think he's that guy who picks up a top offensive line and moves it up the ice. He's not. But is he an absolutely brilliant complementary attacker to that player who does carry the puck? And this is what we saw all those years with Taylor Hall. Yep. Nugent Hopkins worked so well with Taylor Hall. And you had McDavid and Draisaitl there, and they just needed to work him in with one of them. And it turns out, for whatever reason, I think he's got more chemistry with Draisaitl than he does with McDavid. Those two guys working together with Yamamoto, like Nugent Hopkins and Draisaitl are both very unselfish hockey players with the puck. They both read the game very well. They're pass first hockey players, as is Yamamoto. And you have these three. It is like Bruce, a Red Army line. It is like a Soviet line, the way these guys work together out there. The passing, the combination play, very intricate. It's even like Hall, Eberle, and Nugent Hopkins they were pretty good at this. But these guys took it to a whole other level, just with their hustle and skill level and the force of Draisaitl's game, and frankly, the force of Yamamoto's game. But Nugent Hopkins has just found such a great home there. I agree. And the interesting thing is, what number are they going to be able to sign this guy at?
Yeah.
I hope it's kind of like Matt Duchene money. Like, doesn't he make about $7 million a year? Does that sound about right? I hope they can get him.
I'd like to think he'd be somewhere around what he's making now, which is pretty good coin. I mean, they do pay the guy well. They paid him $6 million a year for the last 7 years. And so, he's put away, enough to buy a few thoroughbred racehorses, let's put it that way. And he, is it worth a raise of another $1 million? I mean, that's what they're going to haggle over, but he's definitely in the high rent district, and his agent and his camp will be able to make a pretty strong case that, he's still improving as a hockey player, deep into his 20s. And that's where, your case, and I made the same case from a different angle, that the Oilers need to be keeping some of their core players like long term rather than constantly turning over their guys when they're 24, 25, 26 years old, as they've been doing time after time. And Nuge is on the vanguard of guys that have been on I mean, this is his ninth year with the Oilers. He's played 604 NHL games now, all of them with the Oilers. I mean, the last guy to do that, play 600 games with the Oilers before he played anywhere else, I think it was Alashevsky.
So he's 27 now.
Just turned 27.
Just turned 27. So
Mm-hmm.
he'll be 27 next year, correct?
Right.
Through
Yeah.
the season, essentially.
Yeah.
So the first year of his new deal, he'd be 28. So we go
Mm-hmm.
28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. If you go the full 8 years, 35. Right. And I got to do these on my fingers, as people just saw. So that's getting into a little bit of the risky territory in the final 2 or 3 years of his contract. But for players who really skate well, it's less of a concern for me than players who play that physical game. But I'm comfortable with giving him primetime money that into his 30s, because he offers so much to a team. He's certainly found a role. McDavid and Draisaitl are going to be here hopefully that entire time. So I think this is one of these players that you make sure you sign, and I'd be surprised if they didn't at this point.
Yeah, well, 4 or 5 years would be a nice
Perfect.
compromise. It'd be nice to get him for a few years, but at minimum they need to extend him for a couple or 3 years.
Give him more money short term is what I would prefer. Like if that's what he really wants, give him, do it that way.
Well, I expect what he really wants is more of the same. I mean, he's been digging on this team. He's played for 8 different coaches, David, on the Oilers. He's never played on any other team, and he's still already played for 8 NHL coaches.
Like
most guys that
hockey,
have played for 8 coaches have been traded 4 times, right? Not Nuge. So, and he's finally, I mean, surely he sees this is a good situation. It's good for him. It's good for the team. Finally, he's in an environment where the team is on the rise, and he's playing a big role. He's maybe not playing the role he expected when he was first overall draft pick in 2011, but he's playing a big role, and he's playing in all situations, and he's a very important player to the team, and he's a huge glue player to this team. Like, have you ever heard that guy complain about anything? Ever hear him say, geez, McDavid and Draisaitl get to play together all the time, and I got Milan Lucic on my line, and I'm supposed to be playing the other team's second toughest? You can look at it and you say, yeah, that's exactly what's happening, but you will never, ever hear the guy. Like he's a real pro in my view, very positive person, part of the leadership group of the team, and I have a lot of positive words for Ryan Nugent-Hopkins.
And he's my wife's favorite player, so there you go.
Well, he's one of mine. I got a 93 blue, in my closet that I dig out when I actually get to go to the games, and it's because I've always liked this player. Liked him when he was with Red Deer, and before Edmonton drafted him. So,
just trying to get some stats here on him. I want to see. Did you check, Bruce, how he did? Why can't I get this? My computer's not. Oh, here we go. By game. There we go. How did he do? I'll just quickly get this for us all, if my computer will cooperate. After he joined the Dynamite line.
Well, exactly. Basically 41 points in 30 games.
Where did he rank in league scoring? Do you know?
Top 5, 5th in the league.
Okay, there you go. That's what I was going to look for.
Yeah. All those numbers I rattled off earlier. I mean, they put the Dynamite line together. Basically New Year's Eve, and then January 2nd they made 2 big changes, and by January 2nd in Buffalo that line was together, and mostly it stayed together other than one game along the way that they put Nuge with McDavid to try and get McDavid going. Now you wouldn't expect that. And then the very last game that they lost to Winnipeg, where they moved Nuge up to or down to the McDavid line and put Ennis with into the Dynamite line, and they played well, but they lost that game, that last game that they played. So the very last look we had was of Tippett sort of trying out another option. But my personal feeling is that the Dynamite line was so good together. Why mess with that? Tinker with the McDavid line a little bit. And if Chicago wants to put Jonathan Taves and company out against McDavid, well, then let Draisaitl and company go out and crush their second line. I think that's a good strategy, frankly.
Who knows? We'll see. I can see the attraction to having like the pairs together. But
Mm-hmm.
maybe in the end they'll put Yamamoto with McDavid
Well,
and
that's another
Nuge
possibility, isn't
and
it?
Draisaitl together and kind of mix it up that way. Bruce, let's look at the trade deadline now, and
Mm-hmm.
and when I talk about the trade deadline, I mean the whole trading season, where trades were made specifically around getting into the playoffs or doing well in the playoffs. And I start the clock starts ticking on that for me on December 16th when Arizona traded for Taylor Hall, and it
Mm-hmm.
continues up to February 24th, the day of the trade deadline.
I
And
saw you had a picture of Hall at the top of your post, David. That seemed like a
yes,
good idea to get some clicks.
well, we're looking for winners and losers at the trade deadline, and he certainly factors into that, Bruce.
Yeah.
He certainly factors into that because, and it's interesting because if this had been a regular playoff season, and this is why I call
Oh
it the
yeah.
weirdest one, because if this had been a regular playoff season, to suggest that Arizona was a winner of this
Yeah.
trading season, because they probably weren't going to make the playoffs, and the only
Right.
reason they have a chance in the playoffs is because of this wacky system where 24 teams are in the playoffs.
Yeah. I
Taylor
mean,
Hall, they did worse. I'm pretty. Last time I checked, they did worse when Taylor Hall after he joined the team,
mm-hmm.
and New Jersey did better. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm just throwing that out there, not for any particular purpose, but
Well, I got two
I'm saying
reasons
they're a
for you:
winner.
goaltending and goaltending.
Yeah, fair enough.
Arizona's goalie got hurt. Darcy Kemper got hurt in the second game Hall played, and meanwhile Mackenzie Blackwood went nuts in New Jersey and really secured the job. So both of those things are kind of not really Taylor Hall's territory, but the end result was exactly as you say. New Jersey got better, Arizona got worse.
Excellent point to make. So I would say, anyway, will they have their goalie back, Arizona? Because they will have Taylor Hall, and now they're
Yeah,
in the playoffs, and now they get a chance to use Taylor Hall in the playoffs, which was always the idea. So suddenly they went from a total loser of the trading
right.
season to a total winner. So do you agree with that assessment?
Well, they're going to be a lot harder to handle in the playoffs with Taylor Hall on the team, and if they got Darcy Kemper back and healthy and anywhere near the form he was he was having a career year, and then yeah, I was watching the game that he got hurt. And the funky thing, a troll might point out that he got hurt making a save after a Taylor Hall giveaway led to a jailbreak for the other team. And Kemper got hurt late in the game, and I saw him going off to the bench, very upset. And that's often the real key to, is the guy really injured or is he just banged up, And when you see guys flinging his equipment as he goes off the ice and swearing and stuff, uh, it's not so much maybe that he's in pain, but that he knows he's, ruptured something and he's going to be out for a long time. You can just tell by the guy's reaction. He's upset that he's going to RIR and he knows it already. And Kemper was a groin thing and he missed weeks and weeks in Arizona, fell down the charts. But they, he certainly got lots of time to heal up now, right? So they're a more dangerous team in the playoffs, and they just reached the point where I was just about ready to write them off. I got to the point where I think, well, there's no way they're catching Edmonton. Maybe they get up to eighth, but they're still going to need like they really fallen back, and the odds were stacked against them making it at all. So it turns out this 24 team uh, slate of hand has given a few teams second life after what appeared to be an unsuccessful season.
Another team in that same boat are the New York Rangers. So they traded away their top D man, Brady. I think it's Shea, Brady Shea.
Shea. Hmm.
and he went to Carolina, and they got a first round pick back for him. Now, the interesting thing, though, is I don't know if New York's actually going to miss Brady Shea, even in the playoffs, because although he's a very good player, they have these two young defensemen, Adam Fox and Tony DeAngelo, who are just
Hmm.
ripping it up point wise and moving the puck.
Hmm.
So they got their cake and eat it to the Rangers. They moved out Shea, who's got a
Alex
big
Fox.
contract, big long term contract. So they
Hmm.
got that off the books. They have two younger players who completely can give the team what he was giving them. Plus, they get a first round draft pick. Plus, they went from being outside the playoffs to
Yeah.
in the playoffs. So this was a quadruple win for them.
Hmm.
Um, this whole scenario really has worked well for the New York Rangers. So I'm putting them in the winners category.
Yeah, well, they really shook their team up quite a lot this year. Of course, they signed Artemi Panarin, who had a fantastic season in New York,
Yeah,
and really should be in the conversation for the Hart.
yeah.
Uh, in terms of just the level of his performance, regardless of their playoff position. He really was a tremendous player for them at even strength. They got Capo Caco. They won the second lottery pick last year, and they added Capo Caco to their team. They got Adam Fox in, a kind of a steal of a deal, but he made it clear when he was in college that not only was he not going to go to Calgary, he wanted to go to New York, and that was that. And he wound up going to New York. He got traded twice. His rights got traded to Carolina and then to the Rangers. And he just crushed it in his rookie season. There's three fantastic rookie defensemen in the NHL this year. Cale Makar, we already raved about. Quinn Hughes, who I will rave about at a moment's notice, and Adam Fox. And I mean, they could be the three finalists for the Calder. I mean, the one guy in Chicago, the left winger Kubalik, who got 30
Yeah.
goals. He's the one forward who might have a sniff, and there's no guarantee. They could well be three finalists, all being offensive D-men that all had tremendous years.
So here's I'll give four other quick winners here:
Hmm.
Vegas, Winnipeg, Vancouver, and Toronto. And it was
Oh,
painful for me,
geez.
Bruce, to write that list of winners. I didn't
No
want to have to
kidding.
write that.
That
I
hurt.
didn't want to have to say any of those teams as a winner. Like honestly, it was
Vancouver and
one
Toronto.
after another. I was thinking like, what is going on here? This just sucks. And especially because
At least it
three of
wasn't
them are in the
Vegas,
West.
Calgary, Vancouver, and Toronto.
Yeah,
There's
could have
that.
been worse. Toronto though. All right, so uh, Vegas traded for Alec Martinez, who they gave
Yeah,
up two second round picks, but he had 8 points in 10
yeah.
games and was playing 21-28. So he's playing first pairing minutes. He's just absolutely given Vegas what they need. And they traded a second pick for Robin Lehner, who in 3 games in net had a 940 save percentage. So two huge additions that could help them win the Stanley Cup, frankly. So Vegas, good for you. Winnipeg picked up Dylan DeMello, who was playing about 20 plus minutes a game, and Cody Aiken, who did well for the Jets, very useful forward. Vancouver got Tyler Toffoli, who got 10 points in 10 games. And Toronto made a trade where they gave up almost nothing and got Jack Campbell, a goalie, who in 6 games had a 915 save percentage, which is pretty good. And Kyle Clifford, who's a physical fourth line player. So when I looked up, you know, Vegas paid a pretty price for Martinez and
Hmm.
Lehner, but they're getting full value on that price right now. And I thought those four teams, they crushed it, and I wish they didn't, but they did.
Well, two second round picks for Martinez. I mean, I don't know exactly what numbers the picks are going to be and exact, all the fine details, but two second rounders, the same price Edmonton gave up for Andreas Athanasiou. And he had 2 points, and Martinez, you say, had 8 points in 10 games playing defense, 20 minutes a night. I mean, that's a guy who's having an impact and almost, well, certainly from 21 minutes playing in their top four. And that was an area, a little bit of weakness of Vegas. So he would have really filled a need for them. And Leonard is it's an embarrassment of riches. Of course, they already have Marc Andre Fleury, and so Leonard, whether he plays in the playoffs is another question. But they do have, two top level goaltenders, and so uh, if you do play Vegas in the playoffs, you're probably going to have to beat both of their goalies to beat them because if you get to one of the guys, then they got the other guy they can throw in there to try and turn things around. So he's um, uh, a an interesting case, Robin Lehner, with a lot of past history, but some excellent goaltending in the last couple of years.
So here's three teams, Bruce, that I figure lost at the trade deadline: Tampa, Buffalo, and the New York Islanders. Buffalo's obvious because they, even in this expanded playoffs,
They still missed the
they didn't give
playoffs.
up a lot when they traded for Wayne Simmons, Michael Frolik, and Dominique Cahoon, but they gave up some picks and they didn't even make the playoffs. So this is one of these. This is like Steve Tambellini circa 2013 when he traded for, gave up a draft pick. I think a third round pick, was it for Smithson or was it fourth? Jared Smithson, and the Oilers didn't make the playoffs.
Call
It's
it a
like when,
mid-round pick. I think it was the fourth, but
yeah,
they'd already
man,
traded their
you
third and
do
their
that.
fifth
That's
for
not
three or
good.
four goalies.
The Islanders traded a lot to get Jean Gabriel Pajot, like a first, a second, and a third, and I think also a second pick for Andy Green. And they proceeded to play 7 games and not get one win. Then
Mm-hmm.
there's Tampa, who traded for Blake Coleman and Barclay Goodrow. I think they gave up first round picks for each of those players, if I'm not mistaken. And neither of them, neither of them got major minutes or major any kind of point scoring, any kind of chemistry once they got to Tampa Bay at all. And Tampa Bay didn't do that well either in the little last stretch of games. So of course those two guys, of course, could completely turn it around in the playoffs, and Tampa
Right.
Bay could be the winner of the trade deadline by the end. But the early returns, not good.
In theory, Tampa's bottom six just got a hell of a lot better, and their top six was already
Yeah.
fantastic, So they strengthened the depth of their team. And part of the reason they went for those guys and were willing to pay as high prices they did was that they came at a reasonable contract number. So they could
Okay.
afford to fit them in under the salary cap because, of course, they have some pretty big contracts on that team, as you can imagine, with Stamkos and Kucherov and Vasilevsky and so on. That finding good cheap players was a high priority, and so that's what they went after in both Goodrow and Coleman. So I was surprised Coleman, he'd been hot in Jersey, and he just didn't seem to find his role right away. And then, of course, the season went away. But we'll find out more in the playoffs, as you say, whether that'll pay off or not.
Alrighty, let's
I'm
leave that topic
I'm
there.
liking
And
Tampa for the cup, all things being equal.
yeah, that's if those are your third line players, that's not a bad third line or fourth line
No
players.
kidding.
They sure paid a pretty price though, like two
Hmm.
first round draft picks for those guys. Like maybe they paid a bit of a premium because of the contract situation where they weren't
Absolutely.
paid so much. Uh, Bruce, you are writing right tonight on the 3 meter man, the Finnish Paul Bunyan, Mikko Koskinen. Do you think he's going to
Uh-huh.
start the first game or not? I'm almost certain it's going to be Mike Smith.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm thinking. I'm almost certain it's going to be Mike Smith as well. And uh, by the numbers, Koskinen should be the starter. Like he's got a significantly better stats. His save percentage is 917 to 902 for Mike Smith. I mean, that's a
Not close.
large margin. And his goals against average a little bit closer, 275 to 295, but better. Koskinen, for a strange reason that I'm not quite sure where it falls between just fluke of distribution and something to do with the playing style of the two goalies. He faced 10% more shots than did Mike Smith per 60 minutes that they played. 10%. Like 3 shots a game more against Koskinen than against Smith. And whether that has to do with Smith's puck moving or whether it's something to do with the way Koskinen makes the first save and they jam away at a rebound or two, but there's nowhere to put it because the guy fills the net, right? Uh, that would take a layer of analysis from uh, Kevin Woodley or somebody like that. I'm not your person to fully analyze what the netminders are doing, but I will say, as stoppers go, Koskinen's a darn good one, and he's valued. You know, the 4.5 million that Shirley gave him, that everybody was so up in arms about last year, that's the 20th highest contract for a netminder in the NHL. And Koskinen was 14th in save percentage, and he was in the top 20 in a number of categories. that suggests that, I mean, you're paying him, if you're paying him 20th, if he's even average, he's outperforming that contract, and he's definitely at least average, and I would suggest a little better than that. So the contract, for all the hue and cry about it, based on the performance he gave him this year, not that bad.
I don't hear anyone bitching about it anymore, Bruce. It was a hot topic of angst and anger all last summer. From the moment he signed it, it was like one of the main strikes against the old Shirelli regime.
Well,
The
Shirley got
final,
fired the next day.
and like, was Nicholson in on it or not was a huge story. And now like there's no talk about it at all. It's like Draisaitl's contract, right? No
Well, there's
one
still people
raises.
talk about that.
Do they
But,
really?
yeah,
Seriously?
yeah.
Okay.
If only Leon had signed for 8 years at my figure, would have been even better contract.
Oh
I
yes.
grudgingly admit it's a good contract, but it could have been even that much more, David.
Well, you know what? The Koskinen contract has worked out so far, and I expect it's gonna. We'll see what happens, but it's worked out. So is the Chris Russell contract, Bruce. How's that for a controversial statement? So is the Chris Russell contract. He's been full value of that contract every year so far, and
I think he got paid a little much for what he produced this year, but ideally you wanted him. He's a 4 or 5, and ideally he's a 5. And if you got enough other healthy guys producing to keep him as your 5, then you're paying him a lot to pay on your third pairing. But yeah, he's insurance in a number of ways, and an important penalty killer. So
yeah, fair enough that he might have been a tad overpaid this year, but I'd say he's at least if he's an average NHL defenseman gets 3.2 million. I'd say he was at least an average NHL defenseman this year. So, but he was earning more than 3.2 million. He was earning 4. So yeah, maybe a little bit overpaid this year. Anyway, you can say that. We'll save that debate for another day. Yeah, I love the 3 meter man's game. There was games where he was so dominant.
hmm
He'd get down on those knees, cutting off the bottom of the net, and play. They just still his shoulders are at the crossbars, and
hmm
I just, you know, the typical thing that would happen is he'd make a couple big saves in the first or second period, and then the teams would start missing the net with their shots because they'd look up and they couldn't see anything. So they would
hmm
just try to get too fine with their shots. They think they'd have to pick the corner and they would miss the net. Now that's not reflected in the stats. It says there was actually more shots on net with Koskinen in net, but that's what I saw, Bruce. That's what I thought I was seeing when I saw him in net. Did you ever notice that, or think I'm making that up?
Well,
Could
sometimes
be.
for sure. I mean, on very hot nights, the other teams would be shooting for holes that just weren't there. So, another interesting thing I noticed about Koskinen was how, statistically speaking, he was almost identical to Corey Crawford, who will
Really?
be for sure Chicago's starting goalie. Now they traded away Robin Leonard. They got no goaltending controversy in Chicago. It's Corey Crawford. 917 save percentage, the same. 275 goals against average for Koskinen to 277. 33.3 shots against for Koskinen to 33.2 for uh, Crawford. And the only significant difference is in their one lost record. I mean, that's just a reflection of Crawford playing on a poor team. It's not on his net minding. It's just his team wasn't as good, and they scored fewer goals for him than the Oilers did for Koskinen, and that's really the explains most of that difference. But from a goaltending perspective, I mean, you could you could barely pick between the two lines between Koskinen and Crawford.
Just checking here. It was very unusual. I remember when Koskinen came over. For European goalies, there was a small number of them who would come over at that age and succeeded, who
hmm
did well in the NHL. And so there was a chance that he was going to do it. So that was a pretty significant season that Mikko Koskinen had with the Edmonton Oilers. I can see why. Actually, I can to give people credit. There were questions around that contract, and
Oh,
I
sure.
wasn't sure. Like I was thinking it's like maybe a coin flip, whether he can come in and do well here. So I compiled a list when he came in of guys who had done well in the NHL, and a few of them had done well, and I was just looking at that, and suddenly the journal website eliminated what I was trying to look at, the little
Hmm.
chart that I was looking at. Thank you very much. Not at all. Uh, there was Nicholas Backstrom of the Wild
Hmm.
and Czech Roman
Roman
Czechmanic.
Czechmanic,
He had a couple good years. Nicholas
Czechmania.
Backstrom. Um, who else had good years?
Backstrom was good for a while.
Backstrom was good for a while. So
Hmm.
that was the hope, right?
Yeah.
Martin Gerber had a few
Hmm.
good years.
Hmm.
Tim Thomas, who was an
Oh,
American goalie but played in Europe, had some absolutely brilliant years.
he was Joe Hardy, David. He
Much
came
later in
back.
life,
He came back and he was like all world. He played. I think he played 4 NHL games before the age of 30. Tim Thomas, something like that. I mean, he started way way late.
do you think he was
And
Joe Hardy or Frank Hardy, or was he Chip?
well, Joe Hardy is a famous athlete
Who's that?
from a famous play turned into a book called Damn Yankees. And he made a deal with the devil. He was a fan of the Washington Senators, and he made a deal with the devil to turn him into this great athlete who would help the Senators, the lowly Washington Senators, beat out the New York Yankees for the pennant. So he's a character without a Frank. It's Joe Hardy was his protagonist's name in this book from like 1960 or something in that era. It's all about
Okay.
making a deal with the devil. Joe
Do you know who
Hardy.
Frank Hardy was
Yeah, Joe's older brother
in the Hardy Boys?
and the
Did you
Hardy
read those?
Boys. Oh yeah,
Remember who
read
Chip
them right
was?
up from number one. Oh yeah, Chet Morton.
Was it Chip
There,
or was
that's
it
it.
Chet?
Chet
Chet.
Morton.
Chet.
Chet
Okay.
and Biff Hooper. Yeah, they
And
had
those
a
books were written
bunch of
by,
chumps. Yeah, Franklin W. Dixon was the pen name of many different authors.
was it? I thought it was a
Franklin
Canadian guy
W.
who I thought
Dixon.
it was Leslie McFarlane. Is that who it was?
He was one of the
Who wrote
Franklin
about
W.
hockey?
Dixons. Yeah, he was one of the Franklin W. Dixons, maybe the main one. You're right. I just know that the name that appears on the cover of all those books was Franklin W. Dixon.
Franklin W. Dixon. You know, Bruce, those books turned me into a reader. I didn't
Hmm.
read any books
Hmm.
before. And those books, when I was in grade 5 or 6, whatever it was, when boys started, I just started to pour through those books like so many boys did in the back in the day. Great, great stories. I could never get my sons interested. Any of them. Of course, they wanted to read Harry Potter, which is fine.
Hmm.
Franklin W. Dixon.
Yep. So Frank and Joe, the Hardy Boys.
Is a pen name used by a variety of authors, different authors. Charles Leslie McFarlane, a Canadian author, being the first.
There you go.
And Charles Leslie was a Canadian journalist, novelist, screenwriter, and filmmaker, most famous for being the ghostwriter. Now, did he also write hockey books, Bruce Leslie McFarlane?
I
Was he
believe
Brian
so,
McFarlane's
but
dad? Anyway,
I don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, there are these lineages of, families of that, I mean, Brian
here we
McFarlane had
go.
a
His
career in
son Brian
media, right?
McFarlane is a
Yep,
well-known former commentator on Hockey
yep,
Night in Canada.
yep, makes
So
sense.
that's how I was bringing it back to hockey, Bruce. I knew I would get there eventually.
Yeah, I don't think there's a whiff of hockey in any of the. Well, I only read the Hardy Boys up to book number 45, The Mystery of the Spiral Bridge. I think that's where I went out. And they were just putting them out at that time, but they wound up getting into the 50s and into the 60s, I think, the series. But I didn't know any of the later books. But there's no hockey in the first 45 books. I read them all.
I'm just checking, Bruce, if book number 45 of Hardy Boys.
Mystery of the Spiral Bridge. You can look it up.
Okay, let's just check that. You, that would be like an amazing. You do say you remember mystery of this. You do say you remember things from the past very well.
Better than what happened yesterday.
The the Spiral Bridge. Okay, the I remember the Tower Treasure and books like that. I
Hmm.
probably
Yeah, that
read
was
about
number one. Star
All right,
Trek.
here we go. Amazon.ca, Hardy Boys number 45, The Mystery of the Spiral Bridge. Bruce, we are not worthy. Thanks for talking tonight, Bruce.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast. And then did you read the Isaac Asimov books next?
I read some of the Isaac Asimov books for sure. I read